Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dream Big podcast. You're in for a treat today. I've got Hal Donaldson, who you may have heard of. He's got this little outfit. It's called Convoy of Hope. And I say that with a tongue in cheek because wow, Hal, welcome on. And you guys are making moves. Tell people who haven't heard of Convoy what you're doing, who you are. Tell us a little bit about that.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Bob, and just love and admire you so much. Convoy of Hope really has several arms. One is that we're feeding 500,000 children every day around the world. We are helping thousands and thousands of mothers start their own businesses around the world so they can feed their own kids. On top of that, we're helping farmers, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, really increase their yields. And then we also respond to disasters anywhere across the United States and around the world. You can really count on Convoy of Hope to be on the ground, meeting needs, and really representing Jesus in people's time of need. So that's essentially who we are.
How long have you been at this? Tell us a little bit about you, Hal. How did you end up heading this thing up?
We started 28 years ago, but Bob, it really goes back to when I was 12, and my parents were hit by a drunken driver. My father was killed instantly. My mother was seriously injured, would be in the hospital for some months with many broken bones and internal injuries. And as a kid, my parents didn't have insurance, and the man who hit them didn't have insurance, and so our family was forced to survive on welfare and food stamps. And so as a kid, I really experienced the shame and the pain of poverty, but I also experienced the power of kindness because churches, Christians would come to our door with bags of groceries. When they saw holes in my shoes, they would put shoes on my feet. And so fast forward to adulthood, and I went out and earned several degrees. And one of the things that happens, Bob, when you're raised poor is you begin this quest not to be poor anymore. And that certainly was the journey I was on. And I began writing books in my 20s. And one of those book projects took me to Calcutta, India, to write a book for some missionaries there. When I landed, they said, well, we want you to interview Mother Teresa for our book. And in the course of my interview with Mother Teresa, she just stops and she asked me, she said, young man, what are you doing to help the poor and the suffering? And I figured it was probably not a good idea to lie to her.
Yeah, so don't do that.
No,
a trap door opens up, you go straight under.
Exactly right. And she just said, everyone can do something. Just do the next kind thing that Jesus puts in front of you. And those words were really haunting for me. I came back to the States, and I just was praying one day, and I really felt like God was telling me to kind of break out of the bubble. And so I went to 8 cities, and I lived in the streets for 3 days and 3 nights. I went to Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, DC, New York, major cities. I rode with the police on the midnight shift, walked the streets with a hidden tape recorder, interviewing drug addicts, gang members, prostitutes, runaways, the homeless. And all I can tell you is that I saw the underbelly of America, and God broke my heart. And I came back home 28 years ago, loaded up a pickup truck with $300 worth of groceries, and just started passing them out to the poor. And I have to tell you, that moment was my sense that, hey, this is my calling. This is what God's asking me to do with my life. And he took that pickup truck and he basically blew it up to box trucks, and now a large fleet of semi trucks across the United States and warehouses around the world. And only God could do that.
I've just always been impressed. There's a hurricane, there's a flood, there's a whatever, and then you guys pull in. I'm like, what? Do you own all the trucks in the world? It's just, it's amazing. Like, you guys should just start showing up. So I know some people who are listening will say, well, yeah, that's great if you can feed, that many kids every day and all that. But I'm just me. So what's my on-ramp to that? And what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think, we're prone to excuses, and myself included. And I think what Mother Teresa said is really true. God didn't ask us to feed the world. He asked us to feed the person in front of us. And so just do that next kind thing. I really do. I believe that Jesus, he wants to help people, and he's just looking for people who will raise their hands and say, I'll try. But I have to tell you, Bob, I was that guy who, when he saw a homeless man on the side of the street, would cross the street to the other side. I didn't want to talk to that man. I didn't want to touch that man. I'll tell you one story. When I was in New York City, I was riding with the police on the midnight shift, and there was a missing person. And we were knocking on the doors in the projects. And we pounded on the door. There was no answer at this man's address. And so we went up on the roof and down the fire escape, and we crashed in the man's window. And inside that window, the whole apartment was just filled with debris and rubbish and beer bottles and you name it. And there on the bed was a naked man. And the police officer said, hey, Hal, help me pick him up. And I froze, Bob. I didn't want to touch that man, and eventually I did. And that night, as I walked the streets, I have to tell you, I just wept because I realized how far I was unlike Jesus. And it was time for me to become more like Jesus. And I think that's a quest for all of us. So to answer your question succinctly, just do the next kind thing Jesus puts in front of you. Don't resist that impulse to do something kind.
Yeah, I'm thinking of among the things I'm kind of taking a look at these days, there's 37 miracles recorded that Jesus did. And so not for other people, but for myself, we just start with like water into wine and then kind of move up the chart. Once you get after about 10, it said that Jesus is walking somewhere and the people just brought people and put them in his path, just hoping that he would cross over them, kind of like the woman that just grabbed the edge of his shirt in a different story, but that just somehow if he just got close enough to them, that things would happen, the lowering of the person through the roof that everybody's so familiar with. But sometimes we think that we're lowering hurting, lonely, isolated people to Jesus. And I think I've kind of flipped that in mind. I think they're lowering us. So when we get in the blast radius of some really hurting people, some awful things have gone on, we can not only get real with our hurts and the awful conflicted things that we think, but we can also just, instead of thinking about doing something heroic or that's going to be spoken about, I just want to put people in his path. And if somebody's hurting and you've got an 18-wheeler or 10 of them filled with food, what a great way to connect what you believe with what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Tell me the hardest part about being you right now. Like, what's the hardest part about being me is that I have tons of acquaintances and not a lot of friendships where we get to spend a lot of time because I'm just always off to the next thing. And so I don't walk around with this like deep feeling of loneliness, but I am aware that the pinch point for me would be I've just been on the move. It's kind of trained into me, this cadence of like, go, 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 that at 63, I'm trying to just slow it down a little bit. And that's the pinch point. I'm constantly reminding myself and having Sweet Maria remind me, just chill out. Just like, you don't have to get it all done. I'm trying to intentionally make some calls to some friends to just say, hey, but what if we hang out on Saturday or whatever? Because I've usually been the one that's on the move. So what's the pinch point for you? What's it feel like to be you right now?
Well, first, put me on your call list. I would appreciate that.
Man, I'm in. Expect one.
Thank you. I think Convoy of Hope has experienced certainly a tremendous success and the favor of God. And every year we've grown like 20%. And, so it's really kind of for us, been an amazing season. But I think we have to remind ourselves that success is actually more dangerous than failure. And it's easy to get full of yourselves and to the point where you don't hear the voice of the Lord. And, I think for me, Bob, amidst the success of Convoy, the clutter of my life, it's making sure that I'm a great father to 4 daughters and a great husband. I think, as people, and you can relate to this because people pull on you in many different directions. If you sit at my desk, on a given day, you would see the number of requests that are coming in from around the world and across the United States, and it will break your heart. But in the midst of that, keeping my feet on the ground, not getting full of myself, realizing that humility and reliance on God will take you a lot farther. When I was younger, I used to think that if I worked harder, that somehow it made God work harder. And if there's one thing I wish I had done differently, it's this. I wish I had prayed more and worked less. And I think I have to keep telling myself that.
Yeah, there's a cadence. If you have a lot going on, and maybe if you're listening and you're either stuck in traffic and wishing you were in that diamond lane, don't do it. but you're like just wishing, or you're jogging and you just got to squeak this in because you got the next three things going on. I've been trying to practice when I get these many phone calls from the back of these books to about the third thing somebody's going to say, because oftentimes they don't lead with their pain point. That they'll call and they say, "Oh, I will talk about a book, or we'll talk about sports or the weather or something." But there's usually a reason that's underneath that. And I'm not trying to pry, but it was they called. So I'm just usually trying to find out, can we find out what's the thing? I'll ask them kind of, if we only had a sentence, like kind of the last sentence we talked about, what would that be about? To just try to find out, like, what's a little bit, instead of snorkeling in the top 2 feet of the conversation, could we do a little shipwreck diving? Let's go a little bit deeper and see if I'm in a big hurry, then I'm just happy with the top 2 feet. Hey, glad you called. Hope you enjoy the book. Have a great week. I'll say something funny and then hang up. And what we'll do then, we make it normative to just kind of be the balloon guy and fun and happy, but never going deeper. And I'm trying to slow down the cadence a little bit and say they probably called because they have something on their mind. Sometimes it's just a junior high kid that just wanted to know if the phone number worked, but usually there's something that somebody has in mind. And so talk about disciplines, like maybe best friends that you've had where you can find the strength to do what you're doing around the world because you're just known by a couple people. How do they pursue you? How do you pursue them? That works, because that's where most people are at. They're just so admiring. I'm one of them. What you're doing with Convoy of Hope. Tell me about the guy behind the curtain. How do you keep it yourself healthy, like emotionally, relationally?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I harken back to my youth and where every hardship would rock me. It would set me back. And I think in time, if you've been beat up a few times or dozens of times, you realize that the Christian life is really a rhythm of hardship followed by miracles, hardship followed by miracles. And it's not going to be just hardship and it's not going to be just miracles, it's both. And to surround yourself with people who get that, who have a maturity that they're not going to just let me cry on their shoulder, but instead they're going to give me an encouraging word. And, I could give you a list of names of people who have been that to me. When hardship has come, rather than let me just cry, they've given me a pep talk. Hey, it's going to get better. It will get better. You will get through this. And I think for me, Bob, that's really helped me keep my feet on the ground. I've surrounded myself with some amazing people.
There's a guy that I'm sure you're familiar with as well, but he had messed up and the week started out bad and it just got worse. The more days it went by, I'm like, oh my God, it was just a dumpster fire. And on the first day that it went really bad, I sent over about 20 helium balloons and had them put in his office. And then on the second day, it took a turn for the worse. I didn't know there was worse left, but I sent over another 20 and another 20, another 20. And it was the worst week of his life. I am positive of that. But I wanted him to know that like God doesn't celebrate these sad things, but what he uses these sad things to grow us. And I want to celebrate the growth, not the dumpster fire. Like I recognize these difficult things happen in our lives, but I want to celebrate the ways in advance that he grew as a man, as a friend, as a husband, as a whatever. It's not making light of those. It's just casting it in a right perspective, that there's times to just grieve with one another, but there's other times to say, this is actually going to do a lot of good. Young lawyer Bob, first deposition ever. And I sat across this big, like walnut desk from somebody. There's a court reporter to my left, some like sneering lawyer across from me, and whoever was going to give the deposition. And I asked the first question. Oh, that lawyer just ripped me up and down and said all this. And I've like asked my second question. There's been no response by anybody yet. Oh, he ripped me again. And he said, what are you doing? This must be your first deposition. And I'm thinking, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And I remember just being humiliated, probably appropriately so, for this thing, for my lack of knowledge and preparation and understanding about how you do it. Now, 3,000 or 4,000 depositions into it, I could hold my own. But I remember somebody saying to me when I went in to their office with my chin, against my chest and my shoulders down, to say, you are going to remember this deposition forever. Like he taught you a decade in one humiliating hour. And now we are 34 years later. I still remember every minute of that, longest minute of my life. But sometimes if we could have a different view of this, and it's easy to see something stitched from James on a pillow in a Christian bookstore saying that, these trials we make, but gosh, being in the blast radius of people who are hurting, getting real with our own stuff, finding a vulnerability gear that we might not have. Man, I just want to encourage you, whoever it is that's listening, find those things. Wouldn't you agree, Al, that those are the times that you've grown?
Absolutely. And I think we need to recognize that the enemy is an enemy, and he attacks our possessions. He attacks our plans, our positions. He attacks us from every angle. And when those attacks come, recognize the fact that that's actually the beginning of your next miracle, that God is going to be there for you, and he's not going to let you down.
Yeah, think of that. It's hard in the middle of it to think this might be the 38th miracle. But to just say, wow, like maybe there's something, I'm going to emerge from this a different person.
That's right.
But what I want to do is not as an Enneagram 7. I want to go jump to the yippee skippy. It's going to be all great. Say something very pithy about it, but instead to just say, this is really hard and this is really painful. And just so much hope, this definition of hope in Hebrews 11:1, that it's confidence, faith is confidence in what you're hoping for and assurance in what you haven't seen. And that would describe so many of those dark places. I know what I'm hoping for. I just haven't seen it yet.
That's right. That's so well said. So well. Can I read you what I wrote in my journal today? Actually,
come on. Hit us.
I wrote this. Though some try to vilify you, rest assured God will vindicate and validate you. And I really have taken that to heart today. That's how I've been praying. So,
that will be misunderstood, that you could set your clock by that. It's going to happen. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. But then what'll happen is that I want to be constantly, intentionally amazed. So I know those verse in the Bible that Jesus was only amazed twice, once at their belief and once at their disbelief. But just to say, I want to be constantly, intentionally amazed. Now, kind of like almost like Forrest Gump when he was like, well, so I bought the shrimp boat and something amazing happened. Or that I bought this, I guess they make apples because there's a bite out of one. So I bought a bunch of stock. Yeah. To be just constantly intentionally amazed. And it takes more efforts because people eat up ice cream and say, that was amazing. And they'll watch a TV show and they'll say, that was amazing. Or they'll have they'll go to a concert and that was amazing. So what we've done is we kind of downgrade amazing because everything's amazing. I want to be like intentionally amazed. I want to slow down the cadence enough they can see an act of kindness, some selfless love expressed towards a stranger who would never know the return address of that, and just be amazed that that's the economy that God has going.
Oh, I love that so much. That's so good, Bob.
And
So
Hal, I'm just so grateful for you. Thanks for loving people. Well, if people want to connect with Convoy, how do they do that? What's the best way to dive in, support? Tell us about that.
yeah, the website really has a lot of information on it, and I'd recommend people go there. One of the things we do, Bob, is we work through churches and work alongside churches. Everything we do is in conjunction with local churches. We're not in the business of trying to lift up or elevate the name of Convoy of Hope. We're really about elevating Jesus, lifting up the name of Jesus, and elevating the local church. And so convoyofhope.org, that's where it would start. And if I could just invite people to pray for us as we're responding to the crisis in Ukraine. We've made a commitment to provide 50 million meals, and we're well on our way. And we plan to be there for a long, long time, and would appreciate the prayers.
I'm just thinking of things you're doing all around. Buddy Joel works for you now down in Australia, and just such a good, solid guy. And all the people, I'm not blowing sunshine at you, all the individuals that I have that are friends that are connected with you, just like they're on the surface, they're the same person that they are 40 feet deep. And I think that's one gift that we can give to one another, is that kind of authenticity.
Thank you.
Well, Hal, thank you. Blessings on you. And for those of you listening, maybe there was something that Hal said that kind of pinged you. Maybe this made you think of something adjacent, like somebody who's hurting that's already in your blast radius of influence. Why don't just say, yeah, I want to remember to do that. Actually, like, just go do it. Like, pick up the phone, make the call, drop off the pie. If they don't want it, I do. But to just say, I'm just going to activate my faith. If faith guides your steps, I'm not just going to agree with Jesus. I'm going to do it. Hal, thanks a million. People, you've been listening to the Dream Big podcast. Thanks for tuning in. So long.